Welcome to Pillowtime Lore. This is your soft corner of the night, a place where stories live like warm embers, glowing in the dark. Before we begin, take a moment to slow down. Let your body melt into whatever holds you, your bed, your chair, or that cozy blanket wrapped around your shoulders. Feel how the day begins to drift away, piece by piece, as if it never belonged to you in the first place. Outside your window, the night is calm. The world has quieted down, and the sky has dressed itself in stars. Imagine gentle snowflakes floating in the distance, each one falling without hurry, without noise, just a silent rhythm to remind you that everything is allowed to slow. And here, in this moment, so are you. The glow of a fireplace flickers softly nearby, its warmth wrapping around you like an embrace. The golden light catches on shelves of books, on soft pillows, on every little detail that makes a room feel like home. You breathe in, and the air feels gentle, safe, peaceful. You breathe out, and the weight of today slips further and further away. There is nothing you need to do right now. No expectation, no demand, only rest, only stillness, only the quiet anticipation of a story that will soon take you by the hand and guide you through places that exist just beyond the edge of dreams. So, let the rhythm of your breath carry you deeper into calm. With every inhale, feel your body fill with ease. With every exhale, imagine the clutter of the day dissolving like mist. You are free now, free to wander through the world of tales where time is slower, and every word is a lantern leading you further into comfort. This is Pillowtime Lore, and tonight, a story awaits you. Sara dragged her tired feet through the city park, the same path she took every evening after another long day at work. The park was her escape, a small pocket of silence in a life filled with deadlines, noisy offices, and stories that felt empty. She often wondered if she was slowly drowning in a job that fed her bills but starved her soul. The park was alive with sound, children chasing one another with laughter that echoed across the grass, vendors calling out for customers, bicycles ringing their bells. But in the middle of all this noise, her eyes caught something unusual. An old man sitting perfectly still on a worn wooden bench, feeding a cluster of pigeons and sparrows that fluttered around his feet. He did not glance at the chaos, nor at the rushing people passing by. He seemed untouched by it all, like a stone in the river of noise. His hands moved slowly as he scattered crumbs, and the birds trusted him enough to come close. Sara felt a strange pull, a sense that he was not just another old man killing time. There was weight in the way he sat, calm and rooted, as if his presence had its own gravity. She slowed her steps, pretending not to notice him. But her thoughts kept circling back. Who was he? Why did he sit there every evening? What story hid behind those patient eyes? It was not just curiosity, It was instinct, the same instinct that once made her fall in love with journalism, to search for hidden truths beneath ordinary faces. Sara did not speak to him that day, but as she left the park, the thought stayed with her, stronger than her exhaustion. Maybe there was a story waiting on that bench, and maybe, without knowing it, her life was about to change forever. The newsroom smelled of burnt coffee and printer ink. Screens flickered with half-written headlines, and the sound of fingers clattering on keyboards filled the air. Sara sat at her desk with a blank document open, her head heavy with fatigue. She had barely sat down when her editor walked over, a man with a sharp voice and sharper eyes, dropping another assignment on her desk as if tossing scraps to a dog. It was yet another meaningless piece, something about top 10 tricks to save money on grocery shopping. Shallow, empty, the kind of writing that pulled in clicks but drained her spirit. Sara forced a smile and nodded, but inside she felt like screaming. She had not studied journalism to churn out cheap lists. She had once dreamed of uncovering real stories, stories that mattered, stories that could stir people, yet here she was buried under headlines that vanished by the next morning. As her editor walked away, she stared at the assignment, her hands hovering over the keyboard, but nothing came. Her mind wandered back to the park, to the old man on the bench, Yusuf, the way he sat with a quiet dignity that demanded attention, the way the world seemed to rush around him while he remained still, like a chapter from history that refused to be erased. A spark lit inside her, small but strong. Maybe she didn't have to obey every order. Maybe she could follow her instinct, write about something raw and human, something no one else would see. Sara leaned back in her chair, her lips curving into the first genuine smile she had felt in weeks. She would return to the park. She would watch him, learn him, and maybe, just maybe, she would find her story there. Sara stood at the edge of the park path, watching Yusuf as he scattered crumbs from a paper bag. The birds flapped around him in little bursts of life, unafraid of his quiet presence. Her heart pounded as she debated whether to approach it. She was not shy with strangers when it came to interviews, yet something about this man made her nervous. It felt less like approaching a stranger and more like stepping into a guarded territory. She finally walked closer, her voice soft as she greeted him. Yusuf did not look up at first. His eyes remained on the pigeons. After a moment, he glanced at her, his face lined with years that spoke of experience and sorrow. She introduced herself, mentioning she was a journalist and that she wished to know his story. His response was quick, almost like a reflex. He shook his head and said with surprising firmness, "You wouldn't understand. The real stories are the ones people bury." The words lingered in the air like a secret. Sara blinked, unsure what to say. She felt rejected, yet oddly fascinated. His refusal only made her want to know more. She walked away that day, but her mind kept circling back to those words. What stories had been buried? What truths weighed so heavily on him that even speaking about them felt dangerous? So she returned the next day and the next, sometimes with tea in hand, which she placed beside him quietly. Sometimes she only smiled as she passed, letting him know she noticed him but did not want to force her presence. Yusuf never spoke much, but his eyes softened. His silence grew less rigid, like a door barely opening, fragile but real. A delicate trust was beginning to form between them. The days turned into weeks, and with each visit, Sara found Yusuf a little less distant. He still sat on the same bench with his bag of crumbs, but his eyes no longer carried the same guarded steel whenever she approached. One afternoon, as the light fell soft across the park, he spoke first. A single line about how the winters used to be harsher when he was younger. It was not much, but to Sara it felt like a door creaking open. Encouraged, she listened closely, letting silence stretch so he could fill it in. His own time, Yusuf began to share fragments, not a full story, never the whole picture, just scattered pieces of a life. He talked about a small town he once lived in, the school where he worked, the joy of teaching children how to read, the way laughter once filled his days. Sara could hear the warmth in his voice when he spoke of those times, yet just as quickly his words would fade into silence, as if something heavier was pressing him back. There were hints of loss, to a friend who never returned, a time when neighbors no longer trusted each other, moments when he had to watch injustice and could do nothing. Sara felt an ache in her chest as she listened, wanting to ask questions, to pull the truth out of him. But Yusuf's tone carried a warning, like he was measuring each word carefully, offering only what he felt the world could handle. Sara struggled with patience. Her instincts, as a journalist, begged her to dig deeper, to demand answers, but something told her this story required gentleness. She could not rush him. The truth was there, waiting beneath the surface, and though it tempted her every moment, she knew she had to earn it slowly. One evening, as the sun sank lower and the park grew quieter, Yusuf's voice carried a different weight. There was no small talk about birds or childhood this time. Instead, he leaned back against the bench, and for the first time let Sara glimpse the shadows he had been holding. He told her that many years ago he had been taken away, not for a crime of theft or violence, but for daring to speak against those in power. He had been a school teacher who believed in honesty. He wrote articles and spoke at gatherings, warning people of the corruption eating away at the nation. His words stirred hope, but also anger in those who ruled. One night, he was dragged from his home, beaten and locked behind bars. Sara sat frozen, her pen forgotten in her hand, as Yusuf described the walls of his prison, cold stone pressing against his body, days melting into weeks, weeks into years. He spoke of hunger strikes when they refused to eat as protest, of how the guards mocked them, of how one by one his friends began to disappear, some broken by torture, some by despair, some never seen again. His voice trembled when he recalled a close friend who died in his arms during a silent night. The grief still raw after decades, the pain of isolation marked him deeply. He said, Silence became his only companion. The world outside moved on, but he remained trapped in a place meant to erase him, meant to turn him into nothing. Yet somehow he endured. His body weakened, but his spirit refused to die. Sara's heart ached as she listened. She no longer saw Yusuf as only an old man on a bench. She saw him as living proof of resilience, a man who had been buried by history but refused to be forgotten. The more Sara listened to Yusuf, the more restless her nights became. She could not shake the feeling that his story stretched beyond what he had told her, so she began digging quietly, searching old newspapers, dusty archives, and half-forgotten articles. At first, there was nothing, as if his name had been wiped clean from every record. But then, in an old library, she found a faded clipping, a headline from decades ago, with Yusuf's name bold across the page, describing him as a voice of courage who had stood against corruption when few dared. Her hands trembled as she read. It was proof that Yusuf had once been a known figure, an activist whose words shook the powerful. Yet now, not a single trace remained in the modern record. His speeches, his protests, his sacrifices, all erased, like he had never existed. Sara felt both awe and guilt. Awe at the scale of his courage. Guilt that she, a journalist, had never known his name until now. Back in the park, she looked at Yusuf differently. He sat quietly feeding the birds as if he carried no weight. But she saw him as a forgotten hero, someone who had given everything, only to be erased by the very history he tried to shape. He never spoke of recognition, never asked for sympathy. Instead, he chose silence. Perhaps because silence was safer. Sara's chest tightened. The story was no longer just about him. It was about truth itself, about memory, about justice. This was not another article for clicks. It was a chance to restore a life's significance. Yet fear gnawed at her. What if writing it placed him in danger again? What if she betrayed his fragile trust? Even so, her desire to share his truth grew heavier every day. Sara sat across from her editor in the crowded office, the hum of printers and phones filling the space. She handed him her notes about Yusuf, her voice trembling with a strange mix of excitement and fear. This was the story she had been waiting for. But the editor barely skimmed the pages, his mouth twisting into a smirk as he pushed them back. He called it boring, outdated, too risky. He said no one cared about old men and forgotten causes. People only wanted shiny headlines that sold quickly. The words stung. Sara felt her throat tighten. Here was a story that could breathe life into hidden history. Yet, it was being dismissed like it was worthless. Her editor's rejection made her doubt herself. What if he was right? What if the world had truly moved on? She left the office with her chest heavy, Yusuf's quiet face lingering in her mind. His truth, waiting to be told, yet silenced again by the system. At home, she sat in front of her laptop, the glow of the blank page staring back. She wrestled with questions that refused to leave. Should she stay loyal to Yusuf's wish for silence? Or should she write his story anyway, knowing it might cost her career if she remained silent? She was letting history bury him forever, but if she wrote it, she risked betraying his trust, and perhaps even putting him in danger. The night stretched, long as she paced her room, her ambition clashing with her conscience. She thought of why she had become a journalist. It was never for money or fame. It was for truth, for courage, for the stories people buried. Now the choice before her was not just about work. It was about what kind of person she was willing to be. The evening was cool, and the park was alive with its usual rhythm. Yet Sara's heart raced as she sat beside Yusuf on the bench. For days she had battled with herself, and now the words pressed against her chest, begging to be spoken. She took a breath and told him softly that she wanted to publish his story. Her voice, careful but firm, she explained that the world deserved to know. That silence had buried him for too long. The change in Yusuf was immediate. His eyes, once calm, burned. With anger, his hands gripped the edge of the bench as he turned toward her. "Don't turn my pain into your headlines," he snapped, the words sharp enough to cut. Sara froze, stunned by the sudden distance that opened between them. She tried to explain, to tell him she was not after fame or profit, that she only wanted to honor him. But Yusuf's face hardened, his silence heavier than his words. She felt her chest ache. The trust they had built over weeks seemed to crumble in that moment. And the bench that had once felt like a bridge now felt like a wall. Yusuf refused to look at her, feeding the birds with quick, almost violent motions. Sara sat helpless, guilt swelling inside her. Had she betrayed him by even suggesting it? Or was she betraying him more by staying silent and letting history erase him completely as she rose to leave? Her heart broke with the weight of his anger. The park felt colder than ever. She walked away, questioning everything, realizing that doing the right thing was never simple. Sometimes it meant standing alone. Sometimes it meant losing the approval of the very people you wanted to protect. And both she and Yusuf were left wounded. Him by old scars reopened, her by the pain of breaking something fragile she had tried so hard to build. The night stretched endlessly for Sara, her mind tangled in doubt and her heart restless with fear. She paced her small apartment, the lamp flickering softly as pages of notes lay scattered across her desk, each line carrying Yusuf's pain, each word holding pieces of a history no one had dared to remember. She asked herself again and again whether she had the right to share it, whether she would be protecting his truth or betraying his trust. And yet deep down she knew silence would be another form of death. By morning her decision was made. With trembling hands she opened her laptop and began to write. Her words poured like a flood, raw and relentless. She wrote about Yusuf's youth, about the prison years, about the hunger strikes, about the friends who never came back. She painted him not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience. She let every detail breathe with honesty, and when she finally pressed send to her editor, her hands shook, but her heart whispered that she had done what was right. the article went live, and within hours the world seemed to awaken. Comments flooded in, readers shared it across continents. People spoke of forgotten heroes, of voices buried under silence, of the cost of truth and the price of courage. Sara sat staring at the screen, overwhelmed, her phone buzzing endlessly, and yet beneath the pride swelled an ache. She longed for Yusuf to see what his story had done, how strangers now carried his name on their lips, how his pain had become a mirror of strength for others. She wanted him to know this was not exploitation, it was restoration. The world now remembered him, and even if he never forgave her, the story had become more than hers. It had become a testament to courage, to dignity, to the power of truth that refuses to be buried. Sara woke before dawn, her heart racing with a strange kind of hope. She clutched the printed article in her hands, folded neatly as if it were a gift she could not wait to deliver. The world had heard Yusuf's story, and all she wanted now was for him to see it, for him to know he was no longer invisible. She hurried through the quiet streets, her breath sharp in the morning air, her eyes fixed on the park where the bench waited like a promise. But when she reached it, the world seemed to stop. The bench was empty, the birds circled, but no one scattered seed. Her eyes fell to the ground, where a small bag of birdseed rested gently against the wood, untouched since the night before, and the truth struck her with the force of a storm. Yusuf was gone. He had slipped away quietly while the city slept, carrying with him the silence of years, leaving only this fragile trace of his presence. Grief rose in her chest, heavy and raw. She sat on the bench, with tears spilling unchecked. The article clutched against her heart. She whispered his name, wishing he could see what his story had become, wishing he could feel the love and recognition now pouring from strangers across the world. Yet, in that ache, she realized something. Yusuf's story had not ended, it had only changed form. As the sun climbed higher, people began to drift into the park. Some paused near the bench, picking up seeds and scattering them for the waiting birds, their laughter and quiet kindness carrying a strange weight of remembrance. They did not know his name, but unknowingly they were keeping his legacy alive. Sara watched, her grief softening into peace, because even though he was gone, his truth had taken root, echoing in the hearts of people who would never forget the man who once sat quietly on this very bench.